Do you think that the right wing has a single good point about anything? Is there any common ground? I understand that we're diametrically opposed politically. Our worldview for morals are totally different, but there has to be at least some good point that you think the right makes on something.
There are things that we would agree on because we have shared values in some respects, you know. I do believe that people should have, like, I guess these tend to be considered conservative values. I do, for example, support, like, gun rights in the U.S. I do think that having, like, a communal culture, like a relationship to the area that you're in, and not just being some sort of disparate, like, disconnected, like, city-dwelling, like, whatever. I think it's good to, like, kind of have a root in a community. There are things like that. The issue is oftentimes when we agree on like problems, the solutions are very, very different, or the reason why their problems are very different. There are probably like edge things where we could agree on, but I don't know. There's so much of a split. I guess income inequality, basic econ stuff. There are a lot of right-wing people who take issue with that, though their solutions again would differ from mine.
Well, it seems on the dissident right, interestingly enough, they do often propose what we would have considered socialist propositions just 10 years ago, including the UBI and things like this. They don't seem to care about economics at all. They seem to only care about social issues in regards to conservatism. But there's more to conservatism than that, which is broader. They want to conserve an economic base, this type of thing. In some ways, it seems like a shallow worldview, that it's not as well thought out as some of the leftist positions, which is frustrating to me. Would you agree that that's true?
My experience with talking with most any group on the right is that the social issues are the main thing that drive them, you know. A lot of it is race stuff. I know it sounds really reductive, like, oh, all these ideas just boil down to race stuff.
It's not reductive. A lot of times
Yeah.
I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of times you're right, and I have noticed that it does boil down often to race stuff. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interject.
No, I mean, yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of other stuff too. I feel, and it's so often I feel like it's the easy scapegoat. This is the issue, for example, that striking workers had and unions had back at the beginning of the 20th century, you know. You had a very obvious problem, which was that the working class was being treated poorly, and the bosses that owned these textile mills, these coal mines, whatever, they were not willing to cede to any demands. They started to form unions, and it was recognized that if unions were universal, the textile factory owners, the bourgeois, whatever, they would have no chance. So both deliberately on the part of the government and of these
had to throw in the communism, Vaush, you know. You had
no,
to.
I apologize, but we're almost at the racialism bit. They try to divide people by race, essentially. You know, unions
because they couldn't divide them on class, right?
Right. Well, yeah, they recognize their shared class interest. But if you have a union that black and white people can both join, and that union goes on strike, your mind is fucked. You can't do anything. But if only white people are allowed in that union, all you have to do is slightly jack up wages for black people when the white miners strike, and congratulations, you've strike broken. And the black people don't even have strike funds to rely on in the meantime. They have to take that work. It's not like they were, you know, resting on a big cushion of wealth, black people back in like 1916. So it's often a scapegoat. I would challenge a lot of people on the right. Is your issue really with like feminism or race or whatever? Or are there other adjacent issues that often get written off onto that? Do you have an issue with immigrants, or do you have an issue with culture being utterly subservient to capitalist consumerism? Do you have an issue with feminism, or do you have an issue with the idea that masculinity doesn't have any modern, like, real world aspirational goals, that it's just
you're
kind
starting
of
to sound like Haas right now, Vaush.
Well, you know what I mean, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
there's
I
an
do.
adjacent problem that we can tackle, but the easy answer is always going to be, you know, well, this minority group is at fault, which that's what I'll take issue with when I can.
Well, but I think that that's fair. Like, I think that that's fair to take issue with. This is purely due, and you know, they always bring it back to things like IQ, this type of thing. I have never one time had an engagement or an argument with a racialist that didn't literally base everything on whether, you know, they're just too dumb to live with. And again, Christianity is supposed to reject these types of identifiers. And what I think has happened often on the dissident right is that the dissident right has hijacked what Christianity is supposed to mean, and they, like you hear it a lot, right? Christ is king at the end of a diatribe for racialism, which
Right.
really makes no sense. I mean, it makes no sense on its face. The
They
two
don't go to
worldviews are not
church.
compatible.
These people don't go to church. The modern Catholicism griper shit is LARPing. It's like being a goth. It's an outfit to them. There is no goddamn way these people are familiar with scripture. They don't pray. They don't go to church. They don't do sacrament. Like there's no way. I like absolutely not. Ridiculous. The I wonder how like incompatible this shit gets past a point, because like, pretty sure the modern pope would be pretty cucked by their perspectives, but voice of God and all that. I don't know how like,
but they still bow their heads, don't they?
Yeah.
They still bow their heads to, and the Eastern Orthodox do not, which is my religion. But I tend to agree. You make a great point there. I don't mean to hold you up on your point, but I think I can make it even better for you. If they're cut to the point that the Pope of their church is divvying out rhetoric that is contrary to their worldview, at what point did they say enough's enough, Vaush?
I don't know if you can, right? If you're a Catholic, the Pope is supposed to be the Word of God, right? I don't know if there's like a mechanism within the faith outside of leaving it and joining another branch, Protestantism or Eastern Orthodox or whatever, that allows you to like challenge the Pope. I mean, they're not just like a guy, right? They're supposed to be a direct, avatar of God's will, aren't they?
When you're talking about guns, I'm not sure that guns are necessarily a moral proposition, though. Do you think that they are? Because it seems like the left has kind of just waved their hand, right, and gone, well, we used to be all anti-gun, but now fuck it. We love them guns. We love them Uzis. Give us more.
Oh, for me, it's just it's a tool, really. It's not really morally virtuous in and of itself. They're just considered a fairly common conservative thing. Liberals are still annoyingly anti-gun. I just don't think, at least in the United States, I don't think it's a good issue to like ham on it. But that's only really like a wedge issue for like those prepper types or the conservatives who own like arsenals in a bunker that they built underneath their barn. I think I don't know how much of a culture war talking point it is. The United States will always have a Second Amendment. We'll always be able to get more guns than our European counterparts. That's just the way things are. That's not going to change. All the bickering on both sides of
guns
things.
are awesome too, right? I mean, let's
they
face
are shiny.
They're fucking cool.
It seems like a particularly meaningless culture war talking point because like there's way too much money to be made in gun sales for them to ever like, and to get rid of the Second Amendment, I mean, you'd have to get like the states to ratify it. There's no chance, right? But at the same time, the government's not just going to up and legalize like automatic weapons in every state no license. So yeah, it seems like it's going to stay pretty much where it is right now. I don't know.
I don't think it's going to move off of it. In as far as Democrat politicians who are coming in, especially post-COVID, they don't have any interest in it. We don't talk about guns or gun rights really anymore. It seems to have kind of gone by the wayside, and I think that the summer riots had a lot to do with that. I don't think anybody can really dispute that. Suddenly, that seemed to be a wake-up call for a lot of people on the left, where they went, maybe having this inherent right to self-defense isn't the worst idea.
Oh yeah, sure. The world's getting a little more spicy, politically at least. Probably not a bad idea to keep a couple in your house if you think that it's not to personal detriment and you don't have any mental health issues that you think could be exacerbated through the presence of a firearm.
Why should right-wingers, who are more economically left, drop cultural issues when you yourself won't do so? Why the double standard?
Because you're wrong and I'm right. I'm terribly sorry.
Actually, that's not a terrible answer. I do think that that's a fair answer, right? Why the double standard? Well, it's not a double standard if you're right. I've often said this, right? It's not a double standard if you're right.
I understand the tremendous conceit that comes along with an argument like that. I think I've argued my points well enough to be confident in them, but I think most everyone, like myself or people on the far right, have basically shared values in the sense that we want... I think fundamentally, even if you took like a neo-Nazi, like you want people to be happy, you think that well-being is good, and in some way they think like the whole ethnostate Aryan supremacy thing is like a vehicle for that, which is one of the reasons why one of the core tenets of Nazism is a sense of victimhood. The idea is that things are really bad right now because they haven't implemented the world changes they want to bring about, But that speaks to like a shared value of some kind, which is the desire to make things better, even if their better isn't mine. So if we're to talk about what we actually want, what do you guys want, right? I want people to live long, happy, introspective lives where they care about the people around them and are productive and, capable to the extent that they can be as of their own will. I want them to be free. I hope most people, regardless of their political alignment, would agree with me on that. How do we achieve that? Well, now we get into empirics. And if we're going to talk about stuff like multiculturalism or immigration, I think I can make really strong arguments for the reasons why I think my systems would better lead to those things. If we want to talk about feminism or this or that, the other, it takes, it's a long process. We're never going to fully agree, but I do believe sometimes that some solutions are right and some are wrong. And I have to stick by what I think is justifiable.
Well, I think that that's totally fair. If I'm using a deontological Christian worldview to promote ethics, sometimes I actually have to say, because I'm right and you're wrong, and here's why. Right?
No,
that's think the standard is double. It's not double. You're just wrong.
Right? Sometimes that is legitimately the difference that needs to be made. It's as simple as that. Well, obviously the details as to why get complicated, but
well, sure,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Actually, I don't think that that's a terrible outlook, on that particular question. Not very successfully, to be quite frank with you. The white ethnostate as a historic value is not very well fleshed out, which is why the arguments now are not very good. And I've walked through them. I can't tell you how many times. And they're more frustrating than they are anything. I used to say often with the left, they were interchangeable widgets. You could take one out and move another one in, and you would get the exact same rhetoric. But what I found on the dissident right is the same exact fucking problem.
It's, at the end of the day, it's like seeing a person with cancer using homeopathy to treat themselves rather than, say, chemotherapy. At the end of the day, they're their own worst victims. I know this sounds incredibly, paternalistic, but based on what I've seen online, I really do not think your average alt-righter is a particularly happy or well-adjusted person. I understand this is a criticism that you could levy at a lot of left-leaning people, too. The more radical your political views, the more likely it is that you're going to be, I think, a little bit detached. That just seems to be how radicalism works, but there's this, insistent misery that I see, and it's really unfortunate. I'm very much we're all products of circumstance. There are plenty of good, fine, well-adjusted people today who, if they'd heard the wrong Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Paul Joseph Watson talking point when they were 14 years old, could be miserable right now. So hopefully, we get people out of that as best as we can.
I was actually wondering, Vaush, you went over your positions on gun control, complained about the liberal position on it. I'm not a liberal, I'd be a leftist, right? Or I guess maybe a classical liberal, right? Mm-hmm. And in the case of your positions on gun control, the policies you advocate for, I think at least, seem to lead to the mass slaughter of poor people, about 40,000 people per year. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to debate that on the Crucible.
With regards to what policies?
Sorry, Cynthia, you're going to have to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's on my end.
With regard to what policies?
Oh, with regards to policies that increases in gun control, or the expansion of gun rights, or something that would be useful for the nation, or that you just any policy you disagree with the general left on. The specific ones that I advocate for are the total repeal of May issue, or a total repeal of Shell issue, and then eventual repeal of May issue in all states.
I'm happy to have the conversation. The only thing I'll say, though, to keep in mind is that my positions on gun control are very much a strategic one, in that the likelihood of us affecting any meaningful gun reform at a national level is negligible, but there's a lot of political capital that you could lose in the pursuit of that goal. You could alienate a massive number of people to push forward policies that end up having a very minimal or negligible impact. So if I could snap my fingers and just make the country different, I would probably be way more anti-gun than I am in a general or pragmatic sense. But given how difficult it is, you know what I mean? It would be if morally I thought there was a really big mountain that we should move to another place, cut up and lift and put somewhere else, maybe I care a lot about that, but there's probably something else that engineers could be working on in the meantime,